Welcome back to day 2 of the Modern Lab Leader 2023. My name is Princess Senate, conference producer at Technology Networks, and I am here to introduce our first talk of the day, Shattering the Glass Flask, Women in STEM Breaking Barriers in the Industry. I am pleased to welcome Dr. Anne Welsh as your keynote presenter. Dr. Welsh is a clinical psychologist, executive coach, and consultant. Dr. Welsh began her career at Harvard before opening her own practice with a focus on supporting women in STEM and healthcare. Her coaching brings together research and real-life experiences to hone leadership skills, improve emotional intelligence, and create work-life integration. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Welsh. Following the presentation, we will have a Q&A session, and we welcome any questions that you may have. Please ask questions using the Q&A system to the right-hand side of the video player. You can also use this feature to connect with attendees and discuss the talk, so feel free to take advantage of the chat system by introducing yourself and sharing your thoughts during Dr. Welsh's presentation. You can also benefit from some fantastic supporting literature, which you can download for free below the video player. If you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, please request help using the technical help icon in the menu on the left-hand side of the player. And without further ado, I will now hand over to Dr. Welsh to begin her presentation.
Great. Thank you, Princess, for the warm introduction. I am so excited to be here with you all today, speaking about women in STEM leadership and how we can shatter that ultimate glass flask. So as Princess mentioned, I'm a clinical psychologist and executive coach and consultant. But I grew up a STEM kid. I was always interested in science. I went to nerd camp. I took ethnobotany in the summer one year. I took chemistry in the summer one year. I continued to pursue a STEM career all the way up into getting accepted to medical school and then taking kind of a radical left turn to pursue my PhD in psychology instead. I think my parents have finally forgiven me for that one. But even within that career, I continued to focus on STEM in my research in women's health and in career development. And my practice is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so my clients, just by nature of location, are almost all STEM folks, a lot of biotech. And so I continue to work with students and professionals in therapy and executive coaching around their work in STEM fields. So before we get started today, just a quick little story. This is actually a picture of my mom, Dr. Jean Kavanaugh. I know it looks like she's in a grocery store. It's a newspaper clipping of a program she developed at Evanston Northwestern Hospital called Easy Street. She was a physiatrist and she wanted her patients to be able to practice their OT and PT in real life settings. And so they had a little mini neighborhood, including the grocery store. And this was the press release about that. But my mom was a doctor and graduated medical school in 1969. She was one of 10 women in her class of 300. And she was actually the youngest graduate of Northwestern Medical School to date at the time. She was only 23 years old. As a kid, I didn't know that was special. She was just mom, and mom was also a doctor. It was pretty convenient when I got injured or sick. She knew how to take care of me, and I didn't have to go see my doctor. But otherwise, I didn't have a good sense of how radical that was at the time. I also didn't realize it was kind of unique to be encouraged in my own STEM interest. I thought, doesn't everybody get a Grey's Anatomy coloring book for their 8th birthday? It was just normal. It wasn't really until I was in middle school and really high school that I began to realize that less and less of my peers in my advanced science classes were women. And I got a better sense of just how much of a pioneer my own mother was. In asking her about some of her experiences, she had quite a few entertaining anecdotes, including the medical school report card that simply said, Jeannie comes to school with her hair nicely combed. Or the fact that she had 4 kids, 4 pregnancies, and nobody ever mentioned anything about it at work. I'd like to think that these days are behind us. You know, we have programs, Girls Who Code, Women Engineers, but sadly, we actually still have a long way to go towards gender equity in STEM and even further in STEM leadership. So that said, let's dive in. Just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. I'm hoping to leave some good time at the end for Q&A, but we'll start with what is leadership and why is it even important in STEM? And then we'll talk about why women's leadership in particular is important. We'll look at the barriers to women's leadership, and we'll look at both the barriers that show up in terms of building a research career, as well as some of the more general barriers in industry. And then we will look at how companies and labs can support women in their career growth. And we'll look at how women themselves can overcome some barriers, lead in a way that feels authentic to them, and in a way where they can be seen, heard, and valued for their own contributions. So let's start at the beginning. What is leadership? There are lots of definitions, but they all boil down to guiding a group of individuals towards a goal. Leadership can involve vision, strategic planning, tactical advising. It can be poor and get in the way of progress, or it can be brilliant and inspirational. Most scientists don't go into the field to become a leader of groups, but leadership is vital to running a lab. So what are the components of leadership in a lab setting? The first is that vision. Leaders have to come up with the strategic direction for the team. They have to develop the research goals, they prioritize tasks, and create the map for getting the lab where it needs to be. Leaders are also responsible for decision making. They make the critical decisions when the group faces a challenge, whether that challenge is interpersonal or funding or scientific. They analyze all of the moving parts of the lab, the science, the people, and they determine which risks to take to create solutions to the challenges as they arise. Leaders are also in charge of resource management. I would love to live in a world in which science had infinite funding, but we all know that that's not the case. Leaders have to manage space, equipment, money, time, workflow to make the lab run as efficiently as possible. Leaders are also the kind of ethical guideposts in a lab. They have to set an example of scientific integrity and adherence to protocol. They have to create a culture of good science. Leaders are also responsible for mentoring and skill development of their team. They have to nurture their team and help them grow. They ideally identify and hone strengths for team members, and they also notice weaknesses and then provide opportunities for people to enhance their skills where needed. And the last piece is that leaders are responsible for creating a positive work culture. Why is culture important? Well, without it, you typically get kind of shoddy work from unhappy people. You have to have good culture to foster a creative and collaborative environment and allow the team to do their best, most insightful, and innovative work. So now we know why leaders are important. We don't just research in a silo, but why women leaders? Well, women leaders make for better leadership. Adding diverse perspectives allows for more creative and innovative thinking. It leads to more broad and flexible point of view, problem solving, novel approaches, and fresh perspectives. In addition, studies have shown that workforces with gender diverse leadership have both better team performance, experience higher employee engagement, and higher employee satisfaction levels. In addition, quite simply, by including women in leadership, we expand our talent pool. The less we limit our talent pool by arbitrary variables, the more choice we have. This allows us to attract more highly skilled individuals. And it actually creates a positive feedback loop whereby the organization gets an enhanced reputation and can further bring in top talent. And lastly, simply put, companies with diverse leadership teams, including gender diverse leadership teams, tend to outperform their competition. So if all of this is true, why does the picture of leadership look the way it does in STEM? So just a brief overview of women in the field. The percentage of women in federal STEM positions has not changed since 2005. Currently, women make up less than 30% of the researchers worldwide, roughly 34% of the STEM workforce in the United States, although the gap is larger in particular subfields, including computer science and engineering. Women only make up 20 to 25% of the leadership roles in STEM, depending on the study you look at. And there's a noticeable pay gap. The average man's salary in STEM is about $15,000 a year higher than that of the average woman's. But let's go a little deeper here and look at some of the data, in particular in the research that we have happening in STEM. So the first thing to know is that women are less likely to win awards named after men. The reverse is not true. Women are not more likely to win awards named after women. In addition, studies have shown that women are less likely to receive funding and grants. And when you look at the data a little more closely here, something interesting shows up. When they look at grant reviews for STEM grants, they found that when they look at just the grant proposal that has no data around gender in it, men's and women's proposals are rated as equal in terms of quality. However, when you look at the rating of quality of the researcher, which does include gendered information, men are rated higher than women. So again, if we're looking at just the quality of the proposal, they're equal. When we're looking at quality of the researcher, they are not. In addition, there was a massive study that came out in Nature in 2022, and they found that overall women are credited less for their work than men, even when controlling for the amount of work done. In fact, they controlled for the number of days worked, the job title of the potential author, the research field, and an individual indicator of work done by the rest of the team, and still found, controlling for all of that, that women were still less likely to be credited for their work. In some of their follow-up data, they looked at potential reasons that people are denied authorship. So first, they found that women are more likely to report being denied authorship based on discrimination. And I want to look at that particular data set a little more closely here. This is a chart. So again, they asked individuals that reported being denied authorship why they felt that was the case. The purple bars are the men's responses and the orange bars are the women's responses. The only significantly different category in which men rated it higher than women was that their contribution did not justify authorship. So essentially, men said, yeah, if I was denied authorship, it's because I didn't do enough work to be an author, which makes sense. That's a really good reason, right? The places where women rated significantly higher than men were that others underestimated my contributions, there was discrimination, stereotyping, or bias, or that they left the lab. And I would argue that leaving the lab might have something to do with those discriminatory environments, right? So again, men say, hey, I was denied authorship because I didn't actually do enough work. Women said, I was denied authorship because of discrimination or being underestimated. That discrimination actually continues to show up even after publication, whereby women are less likely to be named authors on higher impact articles. It means that they're less likely to be cited in future studies. And then, of course, this shows up in leadership, and the percentage of women in STEM leadership declines as their seniority increases. So in addition to the discrimination in the research and publication realm, there are more broad barriers as well that are worth pointing out. The first is just general gender bias and discrimination. Of course, this shows up in any field, but it shows up in STEM as well. And you know, I have certainly had many clients talk about even direct sexual harassment or even assault in workplaces. The second piece is representation. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I was lucky I had a model of a successful woman in STEM growing up, but not everybody does. As a country, I think we've come to see that representation matters. It is important to see someone like yourself doing the thing you maybe want to do, but women don't necessarily see that in STEM, and it can be isolating. There's a lack of mentorship, and it makes it hard to see a way around systemic barriers. The next problem is work-life integration and challenges around structural support. And I think nothing really showed this so clearly as COVID, when women left the workforce in droves to care for kids and family members at home. There can be many reasons for this, but that list has to include societal and cultural pressure on women to be caretakers. It includes assumptions that men will not or cannot be caretakers. It also includes the pay gap that we mentioned earlier, right? If in a couple, one member has to stay home to do caretaking work, it's going to most likely be the person that has the lower salary. And women, by nature, simply of being women, are more likely to have that lower salary. In addition, we have really gendered policies around caregiving leave. By not providing paternity leave or providing leave and not really culturally expecting that they use it, it sends a message that dads don't matter right from the beginning. It also sends the message that childcare is women's work and therefore women's problem to solve. It just cuts dad out of the equation. In addition, without onboarding after leave with things like coaching or any sort of help with that transition, it can feel impossible for women to return. And often women do return for a while and then choose to leave because they can never fully reintegrate. And then the last piece is this implicit bias at all levels: hiring, promotion, networking, team dynamics. I'm going to put an asterisk here. This deserves and is an entire separate talk. And I don't have time to go into the details for today, but briefly, implicit bias are those biases that people have and don't even realize that they have. And it can show up at any level of work. It can be as simple as who you choose to network with. People tend to network and collaborate with folks that are friends and with folks that are like them in some way. And therefore, you see a tendency for men to reach out to other men for scientific collaboration. Another place it shows up a lot is in team dynamics. I've lost count of how many women clients have talked about being asked to do the kind of lab housework, whether that is throwing a party for someone that's leaving, or ordering lunch, or making sure that the solution that the lab needs for a particular experiment is ordered and ready. These things maybe only take a few minutes of their time, but that's still a few minutes that they're not working on their own research. And it sends a message that that grunt work, that busy work, is their job as a woman, and the men are too important to do it. So here we get to the meat. I've outlined why this is a problem. I've outlined that it is a consistent problem. I think sometimes in STEM, we think that the field is so objective that we don't actually face these barriers and these biases. And yet, as I just showed you, they're loud and clear, whether that's for graduate students just starting their research career, all the way up through PIs trying to grow their careers. So what do we do about it? I want to start with the organizational perspective, because really that's what needs to change. I will go into what women can do to enhance their leadership skills in a minute here, but really we need to force cultural change in labs, and that includes men and allies taking shifts and steps to include women, and that includes policy change. So I have 6 ideas here, some of which won't cost a ton but can make a big difference. Some do have a cost, but it feels like a worthwhile one to pay given everything that women contribute to the field. So start with the basics: gender and bias training. If you haven't had your lab, your group, or your organization participate in some sort of DEI work around gender, do it now. Have someone like me come in and start working with folks around these issues. We can help educate, but also take a look at policy more closely and develop a unique set of recommendations for your organization to foster women's career development. The next step would be mentorship programs. Make sure that all emerging leaders, or even those who might become emerging leaders, have opportunities for mentorship. If they don't have access to that within your organization, help them find it elsewhere. It is very important to have others to look to ask questions of, to brainstorm with, to get validation from, so that you see stepping forward and up as possible. The next step is executive coaching. Leadership training is great. I can come in and give a workshop, and that's really helpful as a first step, but it's often not enough to just attend one workshop. Leadership skills need to be honed and grown over time, and providing women in particular with executive coaching to help foster and develop their leadership skills as they try to grow a career in this uneven playing field is key. By sponsoring that coaching as an organization, it sends a message that the organization values women, it values retaining women, and it values growing their careers. It has a really high ROI, and it helps provide women leaders with the tools that they need. The next piece is to establish networking events of some sort for women only and for others. Help them establish connections across the lab, across the organization, give women a chance to be heard, seen, and known by others. This can look like a working lunch or small groups. Suggest specific collaborations, sponsor access to others in the industry for the women within your lab. The next piece is structural support. Again, this is a whole other talk that I can and do give, but start by just thinking about what can we do as a lab, as an organization, to support working parents. It boils down to this: supporting working parents in a gender inclusive way is good for moms, it's good for dads, it's good for families, and it is actually good for the organization as well because it fosters retention of top talent. You need to be offering paid leave, and if possible, offer parental leave coaching. It's a service that allows you to support people as they plan for leave and as they step back into the organization. In addition, you can talk to a consultant like myself about improving your policies and providing training to managers and other leaders on how best to support their employees when taking caregiving leaves. And then the last piece is educational outreach. Support or sponsor outreach to girls in science. Yes, there's a lot out there, but there's always room for more. And by getting involved with that kind of work, again, it sends the message that this matters to you as an organization. So what about women individually? What about the women who are here watching this today thinking, yes, I want to step into leadership and I don't know how, or I'm feeling stuck, or I did and I don't know what I'm doing? Rest assured that's normal. And I'm going to take a little moment here, these last 2 slides of the presentation, to do a mini lesson in leadership coaching. It's aimed at women, but really these are things that are actually applicable to anyone in any step of growing their career. The biggest takeaway, though, is that some of the things women are socialized to do and to be are in direct contrast with what we traditionally at least think of as leadership skills and what are sometimes seen by others, by higher ups, as leadership skills. So I want to rewrite that script a bit. And I'm going to have you ask yourself some questions for reflection. So the first thing I need you to do is to claim your achievements and your hard work. Women are socialized to downplay their achievements, but companies assume that people will ask for what they want and self-promote. So I want you to ask yourself, what are you reluctant to claim? What work have you done that you haven't sought credit for? And also ask yourself, to whom have I been reluctant to show my work? Are there people at your work that you have not said, hey, I did this thing to? If it's challenging to think about claiming your own work, start a step removed. Start by thinking about other female team members that maybe haven't taken credit for work that you thought they deserved credit for. And then once you do that, start to think about, what is your aspiration? Where am I going? What do I want to do? What are my work goals? And maybe even develop a little mini elevator pitch based on what you've done and where you're headed. And keep it in your pocket, literally or metaphorically, so that when you have the opportunity to self-promote, you've got something at the ready to say. The next step is that I want you to not seek perfection or overvalue expertise. Women are socialized and rewarded to be good, to be perfect. They tend to focus more on their mistakes. And in addition, partly out of need, they often seek out expertise as a way to prove their worth. However, leadership is not about being perfect, and it isn't even about being the expert before you get there. good leaders know they don't know everything and that they need support and help and good people around them. So if you have a tendency to focus on perfect or focus on being the expert, I want you to ask yourself, maybe where has being perfect or trying to be perfect prevented me from moving forward? Where have I so focused on perfection that I, in fact, didn't actually get something done? And then I want you to ask yourself, what is my model of leadership? Where have I seen good leadership or poor leadership? And start to think about, was that perfection? Or maybe was it vulnerability? Was it humility? Maybe my version of good leadership isn't perfection and expertise. The next step I want you to think about is building and using your relationships with intention. Women are relationship builders, but they tend to shy away from asking for support, even if that support could be mutual. They don't want to use someone to their advantage. Yet the world of industry requires networking, not using, but creating allegiances, mutual support. Think of a rising tide carries all ships mentality. So that said, I want you to think about, who are my career allies? Maybe even list 10 people that are key to your current or your future success. And think about, what do I need to do to support these relationships, to strengthen these relationships? And then I want you to ask yourself, what support do I need from these folks? What would be helpful? And if it feels scary or challenging to think about that question, back up a step and think about, who have I helped in their career? And what did it feel like for me to offer that help, to provide that support? My guess is it felt good. And so maybe frame it as, in asking for support, I'm actually giving someone an opportunity to also share and feel good. The next step is that I want you to remember, while there is no I in team, there is an I in leadership. Again, women are socialized to be people pleasers and to take one for the team. And I want you to not do that. Your individual career goals are important and worthy. People pleasing can really get in the way. So I want you to ask yourself, how often do I maybe say yes and then resent it or pay a cost? And that cost could be minor. It could be, I don't, get to get home and have a little extra time before I have to start cooking dinner. But that task or that cost could be pretty major. It could be, I said yes to this extra project and didn't get my own grant proposal in on time and lost that opportunity. And then the next time you're asked to do something, I want you to think to yourself first, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? A yes to something is always a no to something else. Time is a finite resource. It is not unlimited. So anytime we say yes to something, we are taking that time away from something else. It's okay to say yes if you are okay with that swap. If I take on an extra project and that means maybe I get a little less sleep this week, or I don't get to the gym, or I have to not do this other project, maybe that's okay. If that choice is aligned with my values, then that can be a yes. But maybe that yes means no to a project I was really excited to work on, or it means no to seeing my kids after dinner at night. And maybe I'm not okay with that cost, in which case I'm allowed to say no. The second or the fifth step is to speak up. Women are significantly less likely to speak up than men in a room where men are present. Even if that room is 2/3 women to 1/3 men, you'll still see women less likely to speak up. Yet women have important things to say, important questions, important contributions, important ideas. So I want you to reflect for yourself on, what am I not saying? When I'm in lab meeting, what am I not sharing with the group? What ideas, questions, concerns, thoughts am I not voicing? And then I want you to reflect on models of communication you've seen that are good or bad. Think about, what does strong communication look like to me, and what have I seen that I would like to emulate or not? And then visualize, how would I like some of these things to come across? Again, you can even practice speaking up, or recruit an accountability buddy if it feels scary to speak up in lab meetings, someone that will give you a little nudge or a wink across the room and encourage you to practice using your voice. And then the last step is to act with courage. Women have a greater tendency to ruminate. We tend to go into worry mode rather than warrior mode. We also have a tendency, or an increased ability, to see the big picture, but that includes seeing the risk. So it can be really easy to get stuck in old stories of mistakes and fears and rumination. But confidence is just acting despite that fear. You actually have to act first to build confidence, not the other way around. A little cognitive behavioral therapy for you, right? You have to change your behavior first before you can change your thoughts and your feelings on something. So I want you to think about, what old stories keep playing through my head? Where am I focusing on past mistakes or fears about how things might go wrong? Where am I letting those things hold me back and keep me stuck? And what would it look like for me to act through that fear? Leadership is a new skill. It involves stretching, reaching, connecting, being seen, being vulnerable. It's okay to try things and to fail at steps even, and then to keep moving forward. So I want you to take a step. Any of these steps, they're not in chronological order. You can also reach out to a coach for support. You can figure out what you want specifically and how to go for it, how to take steps that feel authentic to you and your vision for your future career. You already are a trailblazer just by being in this field, just like my mother and so many other women before you. Now I want you to own that, to feel powerful in that, and to step up even further. So that's it from me today. We'll move on to Q&A in a minute, but I do want to just give you some ways to reach out to me if you have questions. I love to talk about this stuff. If you want to reach out via email or LinkedIn or Instagram, direct message me there. Those are all options. Or if you have any questions about my executive coaching or parental leave coaching or consulting services, I'm also happy to talk further about those. And when you wrap up, there also will be a feedback request from me, a form to have you fill out. I am always looking to hone and improve my speaking. And so if you have thoughts or comments, or again, just questions, I'd really appreciate it if you took 5 minutes to fill out this form to give me some feedback on the talk today. So with that said, I will open up the floor to questions, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say, and what you might like a little more information on. Thank you so much.